I was standing in the kitchen of our dream home when my husband's phone rang. It was late afternoon, sunlight pouring through the wide windows we had argued over for weeks before choosing. I remember the way he glanced at the screen, the way his shoulders stiffened before he answered. He only said 2 words, "I understand," but the color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. That was the moment I knew the house wasn't ours. Not really. 3 days earlier, I had discovered something that didn't sit right. A document. A name. Not mine. Not his. His mother's. The deed to the home we built together, the home I helped pay for, was never legally in our names. It belonged to her. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I had already made one phone call of my own 3 months earlier. And that call was about to change everything. When we first started talking about building the house, it felt like the beginning of something solid. We weren't extravagant people. We didn't gamble on trends or chase things we couldn't afford. This home was supposed to be the result of patience, years of saving, skipped vacations, and careful planning. I worked overtime shifts I didn't need to take. We postponed anniversaries, drove the same cars longer than we wanted, and watched friends renovate while we kept waiting for our turn. Choosing the details felt intimate. We stood in tile showrooms on Saturday mornings, debating marble versus quartz like it was a philosophical argument. We argued over paint swatches taped to drywall. He wanted bold. I wanted timeless. In the end, we compromised the way couples are supposed to, meeting somewhere in the middle, laughing when it got too serious. His mother was always there in some way. Not physically hovering, but present in every decision. She'd call to offer advice. She knew a contractor. She'd read an article about resale value. She'd remind him that property should be structured wisely. I told myself it was harmless. Some mothers stay involved longer than others. I chose to see it as care, not control. I trusted him completely. If he said something was handled, I believed him. When paperwork needed signing, he would say, "I'll take care of it. It's easier if one person deals with the builder." It made sense at the time. He was organized, detail-oriented. I was juggling work and budgets and spreadsheets, so I let him manage the documents, the mortgage conversations, the filings. I didn't ask to see everything. Looking back, that was the first imbalance. Not loud, not obvious, just subtle enough to ignore. Because when you're building a dream with someone, you don't expect to check whether it's legally yours. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. It was mixed in with grocery coupons and a credit card offer. Nothing urgent about it. I almost tossed it aside until I noticed the return address, County Tax Assessor. What caught my attention wasn't the envelope. It was the name printed beneath our address. His mother's. First, I assumed it was a clerical mistake. Maybe something left over from a previous property she owned. I carried it into the kitchen where he was scrolling through his phone and handed it to him lightly, almost joking. "Why is your mom getting our property tax mail?" He froze for half a second. Not long enough for anyone else to notice. Long enough for me to. "It's temporary," he said quickly. "Just for tax reasons. My mom's accountant suggested it. It saves money. It's nothing. Nothing." His tone was too practiced. Too fast. I asked what exactly was temporary. He waved it off, said he didn't want to get into boring technical details. "It's handled," he repeated. "Trust me." And that should have reassured me. Instead, something inside me shifted. A quiet, cold awareness. That night, after he went to bed, I opened my laptop and searched the county property records. Felt ridiculous, almost paranoid. I typed in our address, expecting to confirm it was a harmless filing detail. When the record loaded, my hands went still. Owner Margaret Ellison. Not jointly held. Not a shared title. Not even listed as a transfer in progress. The house we built together, every tile, every late payment, every overtime shift, legally belonged to his mother. That was the moment everything changed. I didn't confront him again. That was the part he didn't expect. Instead of shouting or accusing, I went quiet. Not the cold, punishing kind of quiet. Just observant. Measured. I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. At night, after he fell asleep, I sat at the dining table with a stack of bank statements and loan documents. I traced every transfer tied to the down payment. The numbers told a story I hadn't been invited into. Funds from our joint savings had been rerouted through an account I barely recognized before landing where they needed to. It wasn't illegal on its face, but it wasn't transparent either. The mortgage paperwork raised more questions. My name appeared on the loan responsibility, but not on the ownership record. Liability without control. That wasn't an oversight. That was a decision. I printed everything, labeled it, organized it. Then one afternoon during my lunch break, I scheduled a consultation with a real estate attorney across town. I didn't tell him. I didn't threaten. I simply walked into a quiet office and asked very direct questions. When the lawyer handed me a sealed envelope containing a summary of our discussion and copies of the public record filings, I felt something settle inside me. Not relief, not anger, clarity. I stayed quiet, and that scared him more than any argument would have. It didn't take long for him to notice the shift. I wasn't angry. I wasn't distant. I was simply steady. I asked fewer questions and listened more carefully when he spoke. That unsettled him. He would pause mid-sentence, watching my face as if searching for a reaction I refused to give. Silence has a way of exposing what noise can hide. Then his mother started dropping comments. Small ones. Casual. Almost playful. One afternoon, standing in the living room, she ran her hand along the mantel and said, "Well, technically it's my house, so I suppose I get final say on the decor." She laughed after, as if it were a joke. I noticed she didn't look at me when she said it. Technically. That word stayed with me. During my follow-up call, the attorney explained something in a tone that was calm but precise. If marital funds are used to purchase property placed solely in a third party's name without disclosure, it may raise serious legal concerns, especially if concealment can be proven. Intent matters. Paper trails matter more. That was when the final piece fell into place. This wasn't temporary. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't about taxes. It was protection from me. Asset shielding in case of future divorce risk. His mother's influence. His compliance. What they didn't know was that documentation leaves trails. And I had already started collecting mine. The shift became less subtle after that. His mother started discussing renovations as if I were a guest in my own kitchen. She wanted to enclose the patio, replace the light fixtures I had chosen. "Since it's under my name, I should think long-term," she said one evening, flipping through a contractor's brochure at our table. I looked at my husband, waiting for him to correct her. He didn't. Instead, he told me I was being sensitive. "It's just paperwork," he said. "Nothing changes how we live. Nothing changes." But something had already changed. During my next call with the attorney, I asked a question I hadn't wanted to say out loud. "If something happened to him tomorrow," I said carefully, "where would that leave me?" There was a pause on the other end. Not hesitation, just gravity. "If the property is solely in his mother's name," the attorney explained, "you would not automatically have a legal claim to the home, even if you contributed financially." The room felt smaller after that sentence. I wasn't just excluded. I was exposed. If he died, if we separated, if anything unexpected happened, I could be standing in a house I paid for and legally have no right to remain in it. That wasn't tax planning. That was contingency planning without me. And the betrayal stopped being emotional. It became existential. He must have sensed how far I had pulled back, because one evening he tried a different approach. No defensiveness. No dismissal. Just softness. He sat beside me on the couch and took my hand, something he hadn't done in days. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said quietly. "I was trying to protect us. You know how messy divorces can get. This was just insurance." Insurance. The word landed carefully, like it had been rehearsed. He said we could transfer the deed later. That it was simple paperwork. That once things settled, we would restructure everything properly. He made it sound temporary again. Manageable. A technical adjustment, not a breach of trust. For a moment I wanted to believe him. I missed the version of us that didn't involve lawyers and property records. I missed thinking we were on the same side. I even considered calling the attorney and telling her it was being handled. But her words echoed in my mind with uncomfortable clarity. Intent matters. If the structure had been built without my knowledge, that wasn't protection. That was exclusion. An apology without action wasn't resolution. It was delay. It happened in the kitchen. The same place we once stood arguing about cabinet handles and backsplash patterns like those were the most important decisions we would ever make. He was rinsing a glass when I walked in with the sealed envelope in my hand. "I think we should talk," I said. He turned off the faucet, wary but trying not to show it. "About what?" I placed the envelope on the counter between us. Not dramatically, just deliberately. The paper made a soft sound against the granite. "I met with a real estate attorney," I said evenly. "More than once." His jaw tightened. "Why would you do that without telling me?" I held his gaze. "For the same reason you put the house in your mother's name without telling me." Silence. I opened the envelope and slid a copy of the documentation across the counter. The down payment came from our joint account. The monthly payments come from our joint income. Legally, that establishes marital contribution. If concealment can be demonstrated, the structure can be challenged. He let out a sharp breath. "You're overreacting. Just a technicality. No one's hiding anything." "You hid it from me," I said. He pushed the papers back toward me. "My mom's accountant recommended it. It's smart planning. You're making this bigger than it is." Before I could respond, his phone rang. The sound was sharp in the quiet kitchen. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Unknown number." He answered, irritation already in his voice. "Hello." I watched his expression shift as he listened. The irritation drained first, then the confidence. His eyes flicked toward the papers on the counter. "Yes," he said slowly. "That's correct." Another pause. "I wasn't aware that would be necessary." He swallowed. "I understand." When he ended the call, he didn't look at me right away. "That was a formal notice," I said calmly. "Requesting clarification regarding marital asset transparency and ownership structure. My attorney is asking for documentation from your mother's accountant." "You had no right," he started. "I had every right," I interrupted softly. "I am legally responsible for the loan attached to this property. Liability without ownership is not protection. It's exposure." He ran a hand through his hair. "You went behind my back." I almost smiled at that. "You went behind mine first." The house felt different in that moment. Smaller. Stripped of illusion. "I was trying to protect us," he insisted again, but the conviction was thinner now. I stepped closer, lowering my voice rather than raising it. "You didn't protect us," I said. I let the words settle before finishing. "You protected yourself." He stared at me, and for the first time since this started, there was no quick explanation. No reframing. No reassurance. Just the realization that I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew. The kitchen went quiet in a way it never had before. Not tense. Not explosive. Just stripped bare. He stared at the counter, at the documents he had pushed away minutes earlier. I could almost see the calculation happening behind his eyes, the implications, the questions his mother would ask, the accountant scrambling to justify a structure that suddenly didn't look so strategic. His phone lit up again. Her name this time. He didn't answer. It rang twice more before he silenced it. The power dynamic had shifted, but it didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy. Like something foundational had cracked beneath us. I hadn't wanted to win. I had wanted to trust him. "There's a difference." "I didn't think it would go this far," he said finally, his voice lower than I'd ever heard it. "It already had," I replied. He looked at me then, not defensive, not dismissive. Just uncertain. "What do you want?" It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even surrender. It was the first honest question he had asked me in weeks. I didn't hesitate. Transparency. Not paperwork shuffled behind closed doors. Not promises of later. Not protection that excluded me. Just transparency. And whether he could give that to me was no longer a legal question. It was a marital one. Love cannot survive without respect. I used to think love was patience, compromise, shared dreams drawn on scrap paper at the dining table. Now I understand it's also transparency. It's signing your name next to mine. Not above it or around it. It's building something together and making sure we both legally stand on the same foundation. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten divorce. I didn't pack a bag or call a moving company. I asked for something simpler and harder at the same time. Correct the deed. Add my name. Restructure the ownership properly. No more hidden strategies. No more protective planning that protects only one person. If we were going to stay married, it would be as partners. Fully visible. Fully informed. Because trust, once fractured, isn't rebuilt with apologies. It's rebuilt with action. And if you ever feel something is off in your own home, don't ignore it. Quiet doubts deserve attention. Have you ever trusted someone with paperwork you never saw?